Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the History CV of Britain. I'm your host Paul, and this evening I'm going to be talking to Peter Chesborough, who is one half of the new presenting team on Britain's Hidden History. We're going to be discussing Arthurian history, or authentic Arthurian history. So I'm very, very excited to be doing that because Peter's a very knowledgeable chap. And this, I think, is our first episode talking about King Arthur in full anyway. So really looking forward to it. Brilliant. It's been so hot here today again, but very, very nice. I've got my peppermint tea, ice cold peppermint tea with me. And it's going down a treat. Right, okay. First thing, Robert Tye. So Robert Tye of the History of Troy Waite YouTube channel. Now, I don't know if you've come across this channel before, but it's highly, highly recommended. I recorded an interview with Robert on Friday at Hadley Castle, which was a lot of fun. Now, Robert's work is right up there with John Michel, John Neal and others of that ilk, but in weights, not measurements. So it was a fantastic interview. I went out the night before with Robert for a pint of beer at the All-Sit Hall. Lovely surroundings, although they didn't serve any ale, so we had to make do with the Jesse juice, unfortunately. But it was a great interview. He's a really nice guy, and his knowledge on this subject is phenomenal. So please look out for that. I think I'm going to be uploading it. It should be ready to upload by Tuesday this week. So keep an eye out. I'll do a post. Let's see who we've got in the house. Merlin's boy. Hello, Merlin's boy. Good to see you again. Dr. John Hart is with us. What ho, John? Good to see you. Well, good look. Evening all. Looking forward to this. Peter Chesborough, very knowledgeable chap. And I'll second that most definitely. And Marshall is with us. Hello, Marshall. Hope you're well. Blimey, loads of people. Okay. We've got Robert Paul Corliss, I think that is. I've seen that name before. Good evening, Robert. Hope you're well. David J. Good to see you, David. Andrew Christie is with us. And congratulations on breaking through the 600 barrier for subscribers. I didn't realise. Brilliant. Okay, so the long march towards 1K subscribers, we're getting closer, which is really, really good. Brilliant stuff. Okay. One more thing to mention before I bring Peter on. Hugh Evans has done another video where he dissects the name Smith. And manages to trace it back an awfully long way. And I used to think I had the most boring name in the world until I saw this video. So if you do get a chance, go over to the Origin of the Zodiac YouTube channel and give it a watch. Right, I think we're ready to bring Peter on. So without further ado, let's see if I can do that and then we'll bring Peter on. Hello, Peter.
Good evening.
How are you? All right.
Having a bit of my peppermint tea.
Oh, well done. Snap.
Might be fibbing.
Brilliant. Okay. So I've watched Britain's Hidden History YouTube channel now for a number of years. I've seen many of your videos with the great Griff, Adam Griffiths, and I've learned an awful lot just by listening to you two discuss various topics in history.
That's very kind.
Nice. You're doing some really, really, really good work. Tonight I've got you on to talk about King Arthur or King Arthur's.
Yes,
so we'll see what happens.
Yes.
This is our first episode on King Arthur, and I just wanted to run through the history, say from the first millennium, at the start of the first millennium, all the way through to the Arthur of Camlan. Okay, so with that in mind, if we start at the beginning, do you think, as Lawrence Main does, and I think he's right, that Arviragus was a King Arthur?
Okay, so I've heard Lawrence talk about this briefly before, but as I say, I didn't catch up with your last one if it was in that one or not. So I'll have to ask you rather than what Lawrence thinks particular. But what do you mean by when you say was he a King Arthur?
Okay, so I can say that apparently Lawrence told me that Arv means bear,
Okay.
So that's an indication. The first time that I found Arviragus, probably a year or two ago, that was just one of the first things that jumped out at me about this character when I started to read about him. He just seemed like a very legendary sort of character in British history.
Mm.
And of course, he's tied in with Joseph of Arimathea and potentially the Holy Grail. So
Hmm.
from that perspective, I kind of think he was.
Okay.
What do you think?
So, so you're saying like a similarity in name,
Hmm.
and then also that possibly something about or something in Arviragus' life has gone to then contribute to our overall today our understanding of who Arthur is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so I can't deny that name similarity. I mean, that is something it is, as you say, it's kind of striking when you first see the name. There is obviously lots of different suggestions about what that name could possibly mean and where it comes from. I don't know if you've seen Adrian Gilbert's latest video.
King of the Lowlands.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. So there's one
Yep.
of many. There's plenty of others. I'm afraid I don't know many more off the top of my head. My own idea was it's related to this name, which is like Werok or Wirag, which is the same as the Breton Eric.
Okay.
So like Eric and Enid. There's a part of Brittany is called Bro Werok. And it's not necessarily the same Werok, but that maybe that core Brythonic name was at the center of Arviragus. But
Yeah.
that was just to get, I just from my own research and things that have thrown up. You again, the connection with Joseph of Arimathea is very compelling because obviously that Grail myth then translate forward, 6 centuries to the Arthur of the romances. But from my own personal reading, the only thing I'd say is that there's nothing very concrete that I can look to that we know that Arviragus did, or maybe his setting or his context, which then translates forward to the earliest references that we have for Arthur. So when I look at the stuff about, from the pre-Galfridian text, pre-Geoffrey of Monmouth, when we look at those texts, and then also Geoffrey as well, and the stuff that follows him, there's not a lot which I can read from that and then point back and say, that's Arviragus, it doesn't quite sit well with me. However, as I say, that the name similarity is quite striking.
Okay.
And if there was some sort of already, a lot of people like the idea of like a pre-Roman archetype in Brythonic myth, which is the Arth or the bear, possibly relating to some sort of cosmological importance, Ursa Major, pointing towards the pole star. Maybe Arviragus styled himself as an incarnation of that, just as Henry VII, styled himself as Mab Darrigan, son of prophecy, there to lead the Britons again. If this idea was already present in first century Britain, an idea of a child of prophecy, then maybe Arviragus styled himself in that way.
Very interesting answer. Thank you. What do you think about Caractacus as well? Because, funnily enough, Caractacus isn't mentioned by Geoffrey of Monmouth for some weird reason. Because, I mean, this was a guy that was taken prisoner to Rome and made that incredible speech in the Senate, which, saved the life of himself and his family. So he was a great king. And I think many people think of Arthur as being a great king, don't they? So
yeah. So I've definitely. So if you read Flinders Petrie's analysis of the Bruticilio, one thing that he points out is that he really thinks there's evidence that the original was written in Greek and was probably written in Gloucestershire or Cirencester or something like that. And I think that fits quite well with what Adrian was saying in his latest one about the Brutisilio being a Britannia Prima history rather than Britannia Secunda history, and that would have been Caradoc Revolt. In fact, it might have even been. I think the Tasilio is, I'm sorry, I'm using the term Tasilio as a catch-all phrase for the brutes, the Welsh versions of Geoffrey's texts. Yes, we can, Richard. Sorry, it's just reading your chat there.
Yeah, also as well. Good question. We'll get to that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that possibly there may have even been propaganda in that text that we can't even understand anymore because its significance has been lost to us. And maybe there was something in that original text from the 1st century which was more about Britannia Prima's importance and Britannia Prima's history, and less interested in the West. And then that got compiled in later with information from all over Britain.
Okay.
But yeah, I do think it was really interesting, that idea from Adrian, because it does sort of fit with what Petrie was saying about something composed in this kind of this borderlands between England and Wales. Because really, if you have control of that area around Gloucestershire, Bath, Cirencester, all around there, you've got the kind of access to the Highlands of Wales. And you can that's like controlling the bottleneck.
Right, I see, yeah.
So that's why it was really important when the Saxons, the Battle of Durham at the end of the 6th century, beginning of the 7th century, that was a real turning point when they managed to get those 3 cities around that area. And I think the Romans holding that was very important as well to them. So I think it would have been a very important place of, should we say, political what's the word I'm looking for? Connivances. The Romans weren't above propaganda. It's something I try to say again and again. When we're looking at propaganda, this is not just medieval propaganda or Saxon propaganda. We can go right back. There's a possibility that we've even got Trojan propaganda. It could just all be in there. Yeah, I think Caradoc is possibly excluded for that reason. But I don't think we necessarily have to put him in with Arthur, because Arthur isn't the only British hero. I don't know if you felt the same way, but when I first started getting into this, I was like, wow, all these people, all these characters. It's not just about Arthur. There's a whole world to explore.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Caractacus being one for me. I'm a big Caractacus fan.
Fascinating story. Yeah.
By the way, everyone, if you haven't seen Secrets of the Grail, there are 3 parts now available to watch on Adrian Gilbert's YouTube channel, and they're absolutely brilliant. They're so good. So please do check them out. Peter, somebody is very pleased to see you. They're referring to you as Cheese or Cheesy. Sorry, I apologize.
You're very lucky. You got a legend there, Freeman Jack.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, classic.
Cool. Thank you for joining us. Brilliant. Okay. Right. Okay then. So, who was the son of Magnus Maximus, and was he a genuine King Arthur, in your opinion, Peter?
So, I assume we're talking about Amun or Anun, or
was it Arthur or was it Anton? Have you seen my Adrian Gilbert interview? Because Adrian,
yes, I have.
Yeah, he saw the manuscript at the British Library, and he said that, I'm pretty sure that he said that the name was Anton on this genealogy, but he was told it was Arthur. I think if I've not got that right, I'm very close.
Right. So as from I've seen ones which have Anhun and some which just say Anun, and some where it looks like Amun as well, like Amon. He's often confused with a 6th century character who's actually St. Samson's father, and husband of Anna, sister of Arthur. So I'm going to go sort of go backwards and have a look at it another way. So the idea comes from Geoffrey's seeming interpolation, which is Arthur's European campaign, right?
Okay.
Everything Arthur does up to this point. I mean, I think maybe the conquests of Scandinavia might be before this. But relatively up to this point, we can say, okay, this is something that a king in Britain could have done. He's held the Saxons back. He's brought Britain under his dominance. He's made a series of important alliances with the kings around him. They respect his power. Perfectly possible. But then Arthur's European campaign seems to go a bit off the wall as far as what we know with European history at the time. And Arthur goes through this big campaign. So the idea comes from, which Wilson Blackett put forward, and I think possibly others before them as well, was that this campaign was another story from British history, Magnus Maximus's campaign into Europe. And the stories have become transposed. They thought this had happened because of a son of Magnus Maximus called Anon, who they believed was represented in the Latin records as someone called Andragathius, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is another interesting name if we think about Arviragus as well. There's some similarities there as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a fascinating concept. I really do. I think it's something that really needs drilling down, because there's way more in it in Geoffrey's story. Sorry, all of those characters that we know and love are there. Hoyle of Brittany, Bedwyr, Kay, Sir Urians, Sir Owen. They're all evolved in this campaign. So why is one person transposed? Why have all of these people transposed, not just Arthur? Has Geoffrey just worked them all in? Is something else going on? I think there's similarities between Arthur's European campaign and Clovis's campaign recorded by Geoffrey of Tours. And I wonder if they were drawing from some sort of similar source. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that Geoffrey took it straight from Gregory. I'm saying they might have been, because I think Gregory of Tours is dodgy as hell, by the way. Just throwing that out. So I think that's a really interesting idea. So when you've got this Andragathius who's leading this armies for Magnus Maximus, can we identify him in Britain? So they put him along with this Anon character who appears in the genealogies under Magnus Maximus. Okay, seems to work. Now, when it comes to the name, I don't think 1 or 2 letter difference is really a big deal sometimes.
Okay. Well, spellings weren't particularly, well, they weren't as important.
Well, they weren't standardized in any fashion.
Yeah.
And then also you have to remember that they weren't just standardized in the 1st century AD or the 3rd century AD, but they weren't for the next 1,000 years where this information has been copied and copied and copied and copied, where anyone can make a mistake, where anyone can decide that they know better and write whatever name they want to in there. You generally hope that they're trying to record it as best they can, but even then, they could have been working in very poor conditions with paper that's falling to pieces as they're trying to copy it. We just don't know. But does that mean I think that Anon is an Arthur? I don't know. It's not a topic where I have gone fully headfirst into. But I'm really happy to hold these things open. You know, I'm not going to close off one or close off another and say, no, I think it's this or I think it's this. I don't think some ideas are necessarily mutually exclusive. You know, just because he isn't maybe contribute to the idea of an Arthur, it doesn't mean that there isn't something else going on, that it isn't another older story, that there isn't another person who's contributing towards the idea of Arthur. I think it's really one that's open, but it's also one that I'm happy to be proven wrong on. You know, if someone's got something good and says, yeah, you know, look at this, then great. You know,
Yeah.
I think it's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, I think you've made some great points there. And yeah, I'm going to view that whole situation differently now, I think, because I had been persuaded that it was wrong to refer to him as an Arthur, but you've made some very good points. Well done. So I suppose now we're at the point where I need to ask you, what would you say are the best historical sources for studying Arthur?
Okay, so I know that you've had on your channel, you've talked plenty about the early sources for Arthur. You've mentioned Nennius before, haven't you?
Yeah.
Nennius' Historia Britonum and also the Annals Cambriae as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have Gildas in the 6th century, but Gildas famously doesn't mention Arthur. But I still think.
Sorry to interrupt you, Peter.
Go
I
on.
heard a story about that today.
Oh yeah.
Gildas didn't mention Arthur because Arthur beheaded his nephew. Have you heard that one?
Oh, so it's his brother, Hoyle. His
Yeah.
brother Hoyle. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Hoyle ab Kor was said to be warring with Arthur, and Arthur had him executed. I believe there's still a stone
Yes.
in a museum. I'd love to go and see that. I
Yeah,
really
me too,
would.
yeah.
So yeah, the idea is then Gildas then threw all his documents into the sea that were relating to Arthur. Now, whether he wrote about Arthur or not, I don't know. But I said this before to someone recently. What Gildas's work does show us is that the quality of his work, the quality of his writing, the measure of his education shows that De Excidio would not have been the only thing he wrote, and it would not have been the only thing that the monastery that he wrote from would have produced. And you had other great, very famous thinkers at the time: St. Samson, St. David, Paul of Leon. They would have produced written works. Where are they?
Yes, where are they?
So I think that's one of the important thing that Gildas shows us is that we had a very literate and well-written culture, which is just doesn't survive, unfortunately.
Okay.
So where are we going? We're going with Arthur. So I really like the 6th century Arthur. I really like Atheris up Myrig. So yeah, Annals Cambriae, Historia Britonum, and then there's a few other pre-Calfridian, pre-Geoffrey of Monmouth texts. There's a few poems that mention Arthur or Uther sometimes as well. And then my very favorite, and this is going to annoy a lot of people, but for me, my favorite sources for Arthur is the Lives of the Saints.
Yes, I've heard about this. What is it exactly?
So the Lives are a number of documents from some of them are very early. So the life of St. Samson was written only 200 years after the fact. It was written in the around the same time as Nennius. The life of Paul of Leon as well is not a lot younger than that. Not a lot older than that. Which way round am I going? It's around about the same time. Definitely pre-Geoffrey. There's elements in the life of St. Cadoc, which are definitely thought to be pre-Galfridian. The life of St. Carantoc as well mentions Arthur. So some of them mention Arthur. Some of them are old. Some of them aren't so old. Some of them are useless and are just full of religious babble and, holy frauds and, talk about miracles, which may be very interesting from a literary perspective. It may be very interesting from a maybe comparative mythology as well. There could be much older stories that have been slipped into the lives there. But overall, as like one great corpus of things, you can create a picture of what's going on in the time. You can take the people, you can take the places they're at, you can take the events that are going on, and you can make connections between people. I heard it really well described recently as a creative deduction, right? It's like trying to solve a crime, but you've got to think about how different names might appear, and again, sort of going back to the Anon point,
Mm.
some people appear with wildly different names in the records. St. Kentigern is one I always like to bring up. So St. Kentigern was a grandson of Loth, who took over from Uther before Arthur became king. And St. Kentigern is known as St. Mungo. And although there are theories on why he's called St. Mungo, don't actually know why. But uncontroversially, they are the same person.
Mm.
Right? So
Yeah.
this is how wildly different names could. There's a saint of Glamorgan and Cornwall called Docco or Dockow. He is variously attributed to be the same as someone called St. Cungar of Somerset, or also St. Caddock. And with very good arguments to say why they think they're the same person. But then also modern academics will say, no, he's just his own person.
Mm.
So it's a minefield. Don't get me wrong. Like, it really is. But I would advise anyone to get a collection like Baring Gould's Lives of the Saints, or any of the work on the Welsh saints or the Cornish saints or the Scottish saints, and just go through and just slowly take it in, or just pick through the bits that you want to look at, and slowly you'll start to accumulate more information about Arthur and his life and his family purely incidentally. Like not even going out looking for it. Someone will just say, oh, and this person was a cousin of Arthur, or this person was brother to this person, and that he was related to Arthur.
Yeah.
And just all these little bits, and slowly you can build up a picture. But then in particular, the life of St. Caddock, I think, is really important for identifying Tudrig as Uther Pendragon.
Sorry, Chedric.
Tudrig.
Tudrig. I'm thinking
of
of the British king in the 6th century.
Yeah, or late 5th, early 6th.
Okay, that's interesting. Brilliant. Okay.
So obviously so Wilson and Blackett obviously brought it to the forefront again in the 80s, but it's a very old opinion. With Athorus as Arthur, and his grandfather, according to some genealogies, sometimes his father in other genealogies.
Tudrig
is Tudrig, yeah. And for me personally, the reason why I really like Athorus as the 6th century Arthur is because I feel like the identification of Uther as Tudrig is very strong.
Okay, brilliant stuff. You mentioned Lives of the Saints. Is that easy to get a copy of that?
It's not cheap.
No, it's not cheap. No, they never.
I mean, so Baring Gould's Lives of the British Saints. Make sure the word British is in there, because Baring Gould also did biographies of a number of other saints from all over. In fact, anything by Sabine Baring Gould. The guy is a polymath and a genius. He wrote novels. Bram Stoker based Dracula on work done by Baring Gould. Baring Gould did archaeology. He did work on inscribed stones. He has like 50 books published. It's ridiculous, but great stuff. But it's, unfortunately not cheap. There's quite a few on things like archive.org though, if you've got the patience to go through PDFs and things.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks for that. Brilliant. Okay. Well, Peter, have a sip of your peppermint tea. And I'm just going to go through the comments very quickly. You can have a quick breather.
Cheers.
And I'll just see if we've got any questions.
Cheers.
Remember, everyone, if you've got questions, please put them in capitals for me so I can distinguish them from the other comments. We've had a good question from Orgulug, but I'm going to ask that not now. I'll ask that a bit later as we go through this history. Now, this is talking of Orgulug. He's commented, I haven't got a problem with people hypothesizing that Maxon's conquest have been assimilated into Arthur's story, but it's not clear.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Okay, and Marshall said the wild variance of spellings of these names is testament to the oral tradition, no doubt.
Bang on, yeah.
Lawrence Main would agree with that one, definitely. Okay, couple more. Yes, that's the stone that I think it was Gildas's brother was beheaded, and it's in Ruthin Town Square still to this day. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Could they be linked to Arthur? Thor? I think he's trying to link Arthur to Thor, possibly. Okay, right. Let's crack on with another question then. So,
Cool.
where did we get to? Yeah, so the Arthur of Camlan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people say that he died at Camlan, and some people say that he emigrated to America. So, can I get your take on that, Peter?
Well, yeah, I think we can throw in a few more options as well.
Oh, really?
We
Wow.
can throw in that he maybe didn't die at Camlan, but didn't emigrate to America. Or maybe he'd already been to America before Camlan and come back again. We can also throw in that he is in Avalon waiting to rise again and return as the king of prophecy, the once and future king.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's more options than just those two. But generally, from my reading of stuff, seems like he either died at Camlan or he received an injury which effectively ended his political and military career.
Okay.
And that, I think, leaves open that he might have done other things after Camlan.
Mm-hmm.
So he may have gone to America. He may have continued. He may have continued as a maybe as a regent with a younger, fitter king ruling.
What's the evidence why people think he went to America?
So so there's a great Wilson and Blackett book, The King Arthur Conspiracy. Personally, I prefer the first half, which is from what they do is they follow the alphabet trail. So looking at the Culbrin alphabet,
yeah.
They trace it from, you know, Phoenicia in the Middle East, through the Mediterranean, and through Spain, I think, and then to Britain, of course. I think that first half of that book is amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. Looking at the Etruscan alphabet, looking at the Iberian scripts as well, I think it's really interesting and very compelling when we come to look at the Trojan stuff as well. Etruscan in particular, you know, it's just like it's just backwards Culbrin, or you know, Culbrin's just forwards Etruscan, you know. But the American stuff, they have some fascinating inscriptions over there, which look very similar. And if you really, really want to know about this, you need to get Lee Pennington on your show. Right. Lee Pennington worked with Allen and Barham. I've never spoken to him myself. I've seen a few of his talks. I think Lee is a goldmine because in America they have a lot of, you know, what they call, you know, ouparts, out of place artifacts. Mm-hmm. And they're only out of place because of a decision about people have already made up their mind about how American history developed, right? So they already thought, oh no, the pre-Columbian Americans were all illiterate. They never advanced beyond a certain point. Therefore, if you found anything that questioned that point of view, it was fraudulent.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because I mean, if you find something that debunks the current way of thinking, then you should, you know,
it's new data,
do something about it.
Yeah.
It's the same with science at the moment. Whoops. But anyway,
yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah. So I think so. Lee knows all about these things. He knows, you know, the chain of custody. He knows about where they were found. He knows about who they found them, how they tried to get them looked at, and on all those details. Whether those inscriptions show that Arthur went to America or not, I don't know, because I can't read Culbrin and Welsh, and some of these inscriptions are also, they've only got dodgy pictures of them because it was taken in the 70s under a rock hanging. You know, it's not ideal. We'll talk about the inscribed stones in a minute. I only like to make my mind up about them once I've gone and seen them myself and shove my fingers in the holes, you know, so to speak, and works out what I'm looking at. Then I can make a decision, you know, what I feel about it. And unfortunately, I can't go to America to look at the stones and the inscriptions. Maybe one day I can, but I don't know.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Peter. Okay, let's move on slightly now. So there are many inscribed stones in Wales from the Arthurian period, aren't there? So
yes.
What do they tell us about Arthur and this period of history?
Well, you remember what they always say about Gildas? It's our only 6th century written source.
Mm-hmm.
Bullshit. Because we've got hundreds of inscribed stones. Yeah, they do range in date from, we go from Roman milestones right through to the 10th century, 11th century, the collections of, and they're not just in Wales, they're in all over the West Country as well. There's a couple in Cumbria, there's like 5 in Dorset, in Wareham. There's loads in Scotland as well. But there's a real concentration in Wales, definitely. I think there were a lot more in England at one point, and maybe are still there yet to be discovered as well.
Okay.
What do they tell us about the period? So, firstly, I think, right, we'll talk about, this is going to be a long answer, this one. So can I just share my screen a minute? Is that all right?
Of course you can, yeah. Yeah, we've got plenty of time,
There we go. Okay, so what I think is important to know is something like Gildas, for instance, right, is we have looked at this text for over 1,000 years, right? People have picked it apart. They've looked at various versions of it. They've compared it. They've accused it of forgery. Anything. The whole gamut has been done to Gildas. But these inscribed stones have really only been of interest to archaeologists for the last 100 years or so, maybe, if that, maybe 150 years. And Wilson and Blackett said it, and this is something they're 100% right on. These things are undervalued, hugely undervalued for their historical potential. They are often stuffed in the back end of churches. They are often still out. I mean, most of them are still out in the elements, slowly wearing away.
Peter, that reminds me, sorry to interrupt you, that reminds me of the Lule stone.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I got some pictures of that.
That's the one that depicts Joseph of Arimathea sailing into Wales or Cornwall.
That's certainly one interpretation, yeah.
And apparently they had to be told by somebody that the stone at the museum was upside down and the wrong way round.
Well, so this is the
thing. They changed it back.
Yeah, I'll show some pictures of that in a minute, actually, and we'll go through that a little bit.
Brilliant.
So this is mine and Adam's journey, though. So it started with Adam visiting St Tugled's Church. It's in Penmachno in North Wales. And this is what you're greeted with when you enter the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll just have a look at... where is it? Oh, sorry, I'm going a bit slow here. Oh, don't tell me I don't have the photo of the one I want. Okay, well, we'll just have a look at this one, shall we? Just one more scan. Oh, he's bloody missing. That is just typical. Oh, actually, I think he's on here. Here we go. So this is the stone. They've actually got several stones in that church, and they're actually really beautifully displayed. This is not somewhere where I would complain about how these stones are kept. They are really nicely displayed. They make a big deal of it. And they've got this stone here. Now, me and Adam are very interested in it because of the name on it, Carausius. This is the same as one of the British emperors. He's called around 300 AD. Now, this stone might not be a stone. It could be someone later with the same name as him, but that's why we were interested in it. But can you see this cross on the top?
Yes.
So this cross is the reason why they have this doormat. But can you see there's a problem straight away? So have a look at that one.
It's just all right.
And have a look at this one. It's a different cross.
Yes, this I can see what you mean. The one on the mat is kind of diagonal, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've got a vertical line and a horizontal line. This comes from the Greek letters. We've got a tau, which is the T, it's the cross, and then the rho, which is the R, which is that's the loop of the R, and then it goes out along that arm because that's how they they draw those R's in the Latin text.
Yeah.
And on this one, we have the chi, which is the X in Latin, or actually Greek, sorry, not Latin, Greek, and then the rho. Okay, so these are two different symbols, right? Now, we thought this was pretty interesting because they seem to have, if you go online as well, they list it as a chi-rho cross. But if you go online and just do very basic bit of Googling, it will show you the difference between a chi-rho and a tau-rho cross. And it explains it very simply. Two different monograms, one of them made of the X and the R, one of them made of the T and the R. This one stands for Jesus Christ's name. It's the first two letters of Christ, K and R, right? And this is a literally like a drawing representation of a person on the cross, or Jesus on the cross specifically. Okay, two very different symbols. But then when you go digging into the study of the stones in this country and the study of the Christian monograms that, or the decorative crosses that appear on them, you find sentences like this. So this is from a book called Early Christian Monuments of the West Country, I believe it's called, and it's by a writer called Elizabeth O'Kasha. Now, the book is fantastic. It's one of the few books there is which completely compiles data on the inscribed stones of Devon, Cornwall, and Somerset. And I won't criticize it on that note. It's a fantastic, really useful text. But you get statements like this. So we got the chi-rho symbol, A, the Constantine form. So she's saying this is the Constantine form. And B, the monogram form. And this is the monogram form. Well, this is rubbish. We know this is a tau-rho. It's not a chi-rho. And it can't be the monogram form of that because they're both monograms. A monogram is a symbol comprised of one or more two or more letters. They're both monograms. One cannot be the monogram form of another. Okay,
yeah.
We've got, this is from Charles Thomas. Now, it's not from the book In Search of Do These Mute Stones Speak? But Charles Thomas was the only other person who's compiled all the data on the West Country stones. There's only two books that have ever looked at all of the inscribed stones that we have in the West Country. For 150 years of study, and there's only two books that do it properly. Right. And then he says here, the evolution of the chi-rho left 4th century. Right. This is the Constantinian form. Right. The native development, 5th to 6th, 7th centuries. So he's saying that they used this one, and then it slowly in Britain developed into this. Now, there may have been a change of fashion to the tau-rho, but we know it's not a development because this symbol is as old as this one, and it means something completely different.
Right.
But this is what you find time and time again. And unfortunately, what we find in the study of these stones is that again and again, they have been misunderstood, and no one has ever stepped outside of the discipline to see what other people are saying. What are other people saying about Christian monograms? Well, we're not going to bother looking. We'll just look at our own stuff. They call it a chi-rho. We'll call it a chi-rho. But
it's ignorance rather than being deliberate, you would say.
I think so. Yes. Absolutely. Okay. I don't think they're trying to obscure anything. I think it. For me, this chi-rho tau-rho problem is literally one in a stack when it comes to these stones. It's not just these decorative crosses that have been misunderstood. It's their value has been underestimated as historical monuments. Their scarcity has been overlooked because there's really not as many of these as we'd like, and they're clearly being lost as well. And we have records of them being lost and being damaged. There's records of stones which just don't exist anymore because they've gone. The names on them aren't proper. People will just see what someone said about a name and then just quote them over and over again. They won't go and tackle the problem themselves. And I find this really worrying sometimes. So let's have a look at this one. This is your Llul stone.
Oh, yes.
So the reason that it is displayed this way up, so it's got another inscription on the back, which is a lot more like we see from this period, which is basically, I think it's a 2-name inscription. It might say son of, I can't quite remember. And it's got a Ogomoro inscription down the side as well, which probably mirrors what's being said here. Now, they've put it that way up because when they find these things, they often, so a lot of them, sorry, let me slow down a minute. With that style of inscriptions, they normally find them orientated that way. So they decided to put it that way up. But it really doesn't affect how you read it because it goes down the stone anyway. They could have had it just going up the stone. But yeah, by doing that, what it meant is it covered up. Oh, that's a tiny picture, isn't it? Yeah, now it's a blurry picture. It covered up the incredible pictures on the other side. And so this is the replica that's in the Brecon Museum.
Right.
And they display it that way around and that way up.
Good.
Yeah. It would be great to have it in a glass box that way up so you could see both sides of it. And that wouldn't affect the reading of the back of it because it goes up, it goes up the stone anyway. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make it upside down, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, this is fascinating. It seems to have a pyramid on it.
Yes.
I always
Sphinx
wondered
as well, I think.
Yeah, I always wondered if it was Moses because I was like, this was a parting of the Red Sea.
Oh yeah.
That was one idea I had. But yeah, I like the idea of Joseph of Arimathea too.
Okay.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to show. So these are the decorative crosses that we get in the Southwest.
Right.
And as you can see, pretty much all of them are of this Tau Row design.
So what's the difference between the Chiro and the Tyro?
This is the Cairo here at the top. So that's the X with the R, and then this is a T with an R. And as I say, this is a representation of Christ, and this is a representation of literally the word Christ. Right. But what's important for me, is the fact that these crosses have basically been misrecorded for 100 years. When very basic research can show you what this cross is called. And it's something that's... So I know some very nice volumes have been printed very recently, which go through all the inscribed stones of Wales. I'm sure they're going to be incredibly useful volumes, but I know this mistake has been repeated again in those brand new volumes.
Okay, I'm very tempted to ask you, actually. I'm not going to because we'll be here all night, but I know about the stones you find in Cornwall that seem to be representing the boy Jesus being crucified. Yeah,
so what I would say is, so the wheel cross, which is very popular in Cornwall, in the earlier ones, has a very human-looking figure on it. What me and Adam have posited is that wheel cross design has developed from the Tau Row.
Right. Okay.
And that very local thing has come from this design, and is all to do with that idea of the image of the crucified Christ rather than this Constantine form, which references his name. I'll just show you this one. Sorry, I'll just bring this up. So this is one with a beautiful Tau Row on it. And as well, this one's interesting. This is in St. Endelion in Cornwall, and it's got the name Brocken on it, or Brocagny, it looks like, but it's the name Brocken. So just like Brucken, who is cousin of Arthur, we have a name identical to his on a stone. And we also know that Brucken's children are said to have come to the West Country. Now, the father's name on it is a name like Nadotti or Rudotti, possibly. So it's not what we have for Brocken, but it's just it's a start for us to start digging into, for us Arthurian positives, for us people who think that we can find something of meaning. These stones are a really great place to start. Okay, I believe that stone actually, sorry, I'll just open that up again. This stone, Wilson and Blackett suggested, was for a Brockwile at Tudrig. And they actually suggested this Nadotti was a name for Tudrig.
Okay.
I'm not so sure about that, but that's on the back of Artorius Rex. We have this stone. This is the Cellus stone in St. Just in Cornwall. Again, it's got another beautiful tau row on it. Cellus could very well be a son or brother, depending on what source you read, of Geraint, of Geraint and Enid, and Geraint, who died at the Battle of Longborth, who's very much associated with Arthur. We got this lovely inscribed stone. This is the one that used to be in the River Camel in Cornwall and is known as the Arthur's Tomb, or Arthur's Stone, or the Arthur and Mordred Stone, it's sometimes called, because it's suggested that the River Camel is one of these places often suggested for the Battle of Camlan. Unfortunately, the stone doesn't have any words on it which are vaguely like Arthur or Mordred, but for me, it's really important to look at these things as the real archaeology of Arthur, the real history of Arthur. And I think you've got some questions about Arthurian sites as well coming up.
Yes, I was going to ask you. So,
so I'll just stop sharing that one.
Done. Oh, hold on a minute.
Hold on.
Yeah.
There we go.
And that should be even better. There we go. Right, brilliant. Okay. Yeah. So, what would you say are the most important Arthurian sites in Britain?
Right. Okay. So I'm going to give you a really rubbish answer. Any 5th and 6th century archaeology, I think, is fascinating and really important for the context of Arthur, especially if we're of the mindset that Arthur was a king of the Britons and had power throughout the entire, islands and Brittany. Then any archaeology from the period is really important, and it's all part of that context. One of the ways that Geoffrey has been poo-pooed in the past was that just the very idea that there was some sort of cohesive, powerful, successful Western Britain after the Romans left, that was considered rubbish for a period of time. That never happened. Britain fell into disarray after the Romans left, and then sites, throughout the Second World War, places like Dinas Powys, Whitthorne Abbey, Tintagel, all started producing incredibly fine pottery and glassware, jewelry, amphorae with fine things. They can do the chemical analysis and see how wine or oils or things like that in. And I think that is just that first step. Hey, look, we can actually show there was a very successful, cohesive society with connection to Mediterranean and the Middle East. Not only that, but they're a society which seems to maintain a lot of pre-Roman Brythonic styles and ideas, fortifying hills, using standing stones as grave markers, building roundhouses. All of those things continued, but also so did a particular Roman way of life continued, using the fine Greek stuff, writing in Latin. So all of that is our Arthurian context. That's what we're looking for, this kind of like really fascinating combination of Roman and Brythonic, which was powerful and connected to the Mediterranean, and getting this really nice stuff 100 years before the Saxon court started having similar archaeology turn up in their, in their context. So yeah, I can pick out places. I mean, Tintagel's really interesting. Before, you still hear people saying that the only reason Geoffrey chose Tintagel is because somebody's cousin or his cousin or something like that built it and wanted to make some sort of Arthurian theme park out of it. But But that ignores the fact that where we have found a massive 6th century establishment there with all this great stuff on it, and even a stone which might even say Arthur.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen that. Yeah.
I'm not so
Brilliant.
sure of it myself, but it's still part of the story. It's still part of the picture. Even if it doesn't say Arthur, in my opinion, any stone from that period is still an Arthurian stone. Right?
Absolutely. Okay. I did think you might have mentioned Caerleon as being of probably the most important Arthurian site, but that was absolutely
I don't know about it
fascinating.
most important, but I think it's my point, I think, at the time was you don't necessarily have to run around looking for Camelot when you've got Caerleon. I think that's the point I was getting at, because Geoffrey and Chrétien both say it's this is the early, well, except for Gellywig, which is named in the Mabinogi and in some poetry as Arthur's stronghold. The next place we hear about from anyone to be really closely associated with Arthur is Caerleon, and I think it was more of an emotional point, but it's like, what do you think of? What do you conjure when you think of Camelot? Me personally, Caerleon's got all of it in spades, and it's named as the principal city. So yeah, I think that's the point I was.
There was 3 major archbishops in Britain, and they were stationed at London, York, and Caerleon.
Yeah. Certainly, that's in the triads, I believe. Yeah. And I think Dubricius was who crowned Arthur, was said to be Archbishop of Caerleon, and maybe of Llandaff. But there's arguments about whether there was actually an archbishopric there at the time, blah, blah, blah. But there may have been some other position which we would then now equate with archbishopric, even if it wasn't. I think that's picking at straws. Caerwent is also another really interesting one.
Where's
Caerwent, which is the next city east from Caerleon, the next Roman city. It's the market town of the Silures. Still got huge, massive Roman walls. And it also Caleb Howes did a video recently. It's actually got a church I've been looking at a lot recently. Is the St. Stephen's Church, and St. Stephen's Church is regularly said to be in Camelot. So Caerleon and Caerleon and Caerwent might have been seen as one sort of urban. They're not that close to each other, but they're within a day's ride of each other, easy. They're not hard to get to from each other.
What do you make of Avalon, which means the Isle of Apples, doesn't it?
Maybe it means that. I wouldn't put money on it meaning that, and I wouldn't put money on it meaning anything else either, because I think it's one of the most mythologized aspects of the story. It's been handed around so much that I think that someone could come up with a whole new idea which could be bang on. I think it's really a really conflated and confused story. And the Isle of Apples is certainly one way to read it, but I've also heard some other very convincing ones. Maybe that it comes from like the Welsh aber, meaning an estuary. So
okay. I've also heard that apples or apple trees didn't make their way to Britain until about the 11th, 12th century.
Really? I don't know.
So that's odd as well. Okay, Peter, have a little break for a minute. I'm just going to put some comments on. Lynn has said, I've just had a look and the Lives of the British Saints is available to read for free on the internet.
So the only problem I've had with the Internet Archive is that sometimes when you get the links, it won't show you what volume you're clicking on. And obviously, because they're done alphabetically, if you're looking for a specific saint, you want to know whether you're looking in volume 1, 2, 3, or 4. And sometimes the Internet Archive will cut off the title. So you have to click on it, look through it, see which one you're in, and then go out and find the one you want. It can be a bit of a pain in the ass, basically.
Thanks for that, Peter. Has Peter any views on any esoteric connotations around
Well,
Arthur?
Loads. How long have you got?
Yeah.
I think the cosmic link is the most compelling. So recently they did some dating work on a site called King Arthur's Hall on Bodmin Moor.
Okay.
It's a rectangular feature made up of big stones. For a long time, they just went, nah, it's a animal pound. It's where you store your grazing animals, whatever. A lot of people thought it was older, considerably older, and not just Arthurian older, but a lot older. And they did a lot of dating recently, and they've confirmed this. It's Neolithic. It's around the same time as Stonehenge. Now it's interesting because it's a rectangle. We do get other rectangles. There's one inside. Is it inside Long Meg? Ooh, Cumbrian stone circle. Anyway, one of the Cumbrian stone circles has a small rectangle inside of it, and also there's a quadrangle de Kirkeno, I think it's called, in Brittany, which is a very impressive megalithic monument. So it's not just all circles; we do get squares as well. Now that site is orientated north, so it will be respecting the pole star and the Great Bear. So, yeah, and sorry, I don't know where I'm really going with this, other than I don't really like to dive into the esoteric stuff, because just like with a few other things, I like to hold lots of options open. I've got several different tracks I could go down with this, and sometimes I'll go down one a little bit, sometimes I'll go down another one a little bit, but I certainly think the work done with the zodiacs, so like Hugh Evans' work, Steve Willett's working from Wilson and Blackett's Southeast Wales zodiac as well. The connections between them and information in the Mabinogi, which of course includes Arthur and his knights as part of the story building. So there is definitely a cosmic link to Arthur. There's something going on there. Whether that cosmic Arthur was called Arthur before the 6th century, or if that's something that's come on because of then this very famous king, and the two ideas have been like mashed together. Because I've got one slightly controversial idea, and that is that the real Arthur was never associated with a bear at all until after his death.
Okay.
Yeah,
Really?
well, just this is one of my many possibilities I'm juggling, is that there was already an idea of Arth, the great bear. Then there was the king Arthur, possibly, or Athris, or some other similar name. And then after his death, when stories about both of them were being compiled, they became mashed together. But that is just one possibility. Maybe he was known as the bear in his life. I mean, you've got oh God, what's the chap's name? Martin. Oh, he's an Arthurian. He's a historical Arthur chap, and he suggests that is it Owain Danwyn is King Arthur, but it comes from a mention in Gildas where this one king is called Arth the bear. And he says it's an epithet that's been attached to him, and therefore he is Arthur. But as I say, I don't even know if Gildas is calling some other king the bear. Was our Arthur actually ever called the bear in his lifetime, or is it something that's been added on afterwards?
Good points. Excellent. Okay. Whereabouts are we now? So, well, I was about to ask you if the King Arthurs have anything in common with the Arthurs of the Grail romances, but we've kind of just done that, really. So if we jump to, do you think it's possible that somebody somewhere has a lot of recorded information on Arthur?
Sorry, just thank you to Orgalug for Graham Phillips. Yes, and his Owain Danwyn. Thank you. I'm glad we got Graham Phillips's name there. I didn't want to just say his idea then without saying his name. So great. Do I think someone has some information about Arthur? I think some people have a lot of information about lots of things that are kept secret. This is a very powerful country where people have been keeping secrets for a very long time. Whether that some of them are to do with Arthur or not, maybe. Is there possibly information about Arthur hiding in plain sight? In your brilliant Monkish Scribes episode, you talked about volumes of untranslated manuscripts. What's lying around? What's sat in the back of a library somewhere? What's stuck between two pages of something? And again, the inscribed stones. Is there another stone that Wilson Blackett believed they found a stone? Unfortunately, that's now in America and lost. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be able to see it in my lifetime. And as I say, I like to put my fingers in and touch it before I make a decision. So it's a shame we can't have a look at that. But maybe there's another stone somewhere which has some information. There's certainly names that appear on multiple stones throughout Britain. So that that could point towards the fact that Arthur might have had multiple inscriptions made about him. So we could find more stones. And the other option is that, again, when it comes to names, what if Arthur was known by another name that we don't know yet, and that he's hiding in plain, he's just there? I think that's a distinct possibility. Have you read Chris Barber's Journey to Avalon? It's a great little book. There's some problems with it, but it's very interesting. They posit that a saint called Armel or Arthmile was Arthur in retirement. That was his saintly, I don't know, what was his saintly persona.
Well, like an arch druid.
No, he was a saint, a full-on saint. His name was Arthmile. Sorry, like bear prince. Is what it translates to. Yeah. In French, it's Armel. It's pronounced. Now, Armel gets a different place in the genealogies. I know that Lawrence disagrees with that, because I think in one of Lawrence's incarnations was actually a brother of Armel. So he's not fond of that. And I must say, I do have to agree with him on genealogical grounds that Armel seems to have his own distinct place. But that doesn't mean there isn't another saint out there, which could just have, as I say, if St. Kentigern can be called St. Mungo, then Arthur can be called as a saint?
Very good point. Well said. Okay. I've got one more question for you, Peter, but just before I ask you that, I'm just going to check in the chat box to make sure that I haven't missed any questions. I did see one somewhere from Merlin's Boy, I think. There it is. So Merlin's Boy has asked, is there any other research by American authors on the Colburn mysteries?
I don't know, but again, Lee Pennington and the Ancient Kentucky Historical Association, they have an active Facebook page. They do regular talks, but it's only good if you're in Kentucky, unfortunately. Although I know some people through the internet who reckon they're going to try and attend the next one. And it'd be great if people could film these things so we can all access them as well, so we can all see and gain from the wisdom. But that's the place to go and look. I'm afraid I can't help with that.
Brilliant. Okay. What about this? Or Gulug, can Peter tell us about ancient mining on Dartmoor?
He wants to go all night, does he?
Yeah.
Okay, so we had some science come out recently. A project called Project for Ancient Tin, led by a guy called Alan Williams, and they did a new set of tests for measuring the tracing the origin of certain metallic objects. So it was actually using 3 types of testing at once. So that it's kind of like, well, if this one doesn't give us a clear answer, we've got 2 more that might tell us, right? So it's meant to be the whole point is they're putting in a new protocol so that when people get find new artifacts, they can apply this protocol and hopefully find out where the tin comes from, where the copper comes from, you know, etc., etc. They did a number of tests on artifacts from right across Europe all the way to Mediterranean and the Middle East. Tin ingots found from a Jerusalem shipwreck, and they basically answered the question once and for all that bronze was 20% tin, and that tin all came from the West Country. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Antiquarians have been saying this for a long time. Alternative people have been saying this for a long time, and it's great to finally see that the science backs it up as well. Now, what's great for me is because about 4 or 5 years ago, I started wandering around my homeland on Dartmoor, looking at some strange features. And at the time, I kind of like half knew this story. And we've got an incredible Bronze Age landscape here. There's like 5,000 Bronze Age roundhouses. There's burials. There's stone rows. There's stone circles. There's just, it's jam packed. It's absolutely fantastic. But I was looking at this stuff, and I was looking at it. I was like, this is mining, right? It's clearly mining. Something's going on here. Because on Dartmoor, people only dig holes in the ground for a very limited set of reasons, basically. And one of them's mining. So when you look at holes in the ground on Dartmoor, you've got to go, is this quarrying? Is someone cutting peat for fuel? Or are they mining? There's very little else that anyone will be digging a hole for. Okay. It was clearly not quarrying. It was clearly not peat cutting. So some sort of mining. Where do I find this mining? Right next to Bronze Age houses. So I was like, okay, it could be Bronze Age mining. You know, there's loads of tin here on Dartmoor. Makes sense. And I forgot about it. I just literally completely forgot about it. Just didn't think about it for ages. Start looking a bit more of the history, and I start reading people saying things like, oh, well, there was no tin mining here in the Bronze Age. And I think, what? What? Really? Well, we've got more tin here, easily accessible, some of the finest quality tin in the world, only a meter deep below the surface. And in the Mediterranean Bronze Age, when tin was the thing to have, and the people here were just walking around raising sheep and not knowing what the value between was underneath their feet. That doesn't make sense to me. So I start digging further and further and further. And I don't just find these remains, which I think is mining, in one spot. I start finding them in lots of different spots, and always with the same Bronze Age artifacts next to them, the same settlement buildings, even including walls and pits and elements that are not even recorded on any other archaeological surveys, that aren't recorded by antiquarians, you know, that aren't recorded by modern geologists, but they're there on the ground. And I find them with the same relationship to the same mining things every single place. So now I'm in a situation where I've literally got hundreds of pieces of evidence building up to this idea that Dartmoor wasn't just mined in the Bronze Age. This was a massive endeavor that was going on, huge. And I think, well, how am I going to sell this to people? I mean, really, it's one thing saying you found a Bronze Age tin mine. Say you found the biggest Bronze Age tin mine in the world is another thing. So then it's really interesting that the science has come out recently, because now they need to find a lot of holes in the ground, surely, because to find the tin that fueled an entire Bronze Age, that's a lot of tin. Where has it come from? We need to find the holes, and I think I found them. Now, that was a very, 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 very quick talk about Bronze Age tin mining, and I've done longer ones elsewhere, and I hope to be publishing a Substack soon, which people can enter, which will have all the information on it. I've got about 10,000 words written up, plus hundreds of photographs of artifacts, LiDAR photos, satellite photos, the whole lot, and then people can make up their own mind about that.
You'll have to share with us your Substack account, so I can link it under the video.
It's not quite set up yet, but I will. I'll make sure to send it to you in future, Paul. Right, and I'll send you a link to mine and Adam's ancient video that we did years ago, so people can have a look at the photos. It's much better to see the actual things themselves. One more thing I'll say about it, though, is that our earliest description of tin mining in Britain, it's I think it's in Diodorus Siculus, and he's quoting a guy called Pythias. So immediately we're working from a quote, you know, which is classic with this stuff, really. But it's really interesting the way he describes the tin mining, because it doesn't sound like the streaming tin mining which they think that Bronze Age people did, and it doesn't sound like other methods of underground mining, but it does actually sound quite a lot like what I'm describing happened. But I didn't go looking for that. This is the interesting thing. I found these things first, and then I'm coming across Pythias that's saying something which matches what I found, you know. And that's why what I've always been blown away with this whole process of looking at this mining stuff is that I never went looking for it. I went looking for something interesting and then went, oh, what's this? And what's this? And what could it be? And what can't it be? You know, in fact, at every step, I've tried to prove myself wrong. You know, I've gone out looking for evidence that will show that I've made the wrong assumptions about this. And more, I just find more evidence that supports the idea. So,
well, that's incredibly interesting. Thanks for that. Pythias, you mentioned Pythias. Now, I've read that Pythias said, or when he came to Britain, I think around 380 BC, he travelled all over Europe, came to Britain, and the way that he described Stonehenge, it very much reads as though it was still completely intact, and we're only going back 390 BC. So I know that Lawrence Main, last week's guest, thinks that the Romans possibly destroyed Stonehenge, which is, I think, a very interesting and plausible theory when you think about it. So I don't think Maria Wheatley agrees with that one, but yeah, very interesting theory. Right, just so many comments tonight, which is absolutely fantastic. And
can I just pick up on Marshall's comment? So it's really interesting. So she's got it coming from the Nebra Sky dish. She mentions that the gold is coming from the River Carnon in Cornwall. Carnon's really important because this is two places they've also found Bronze Age tin streaming tools, so mining tools. So this sort of confirms that mining was going on in Cornwall in this period. Now, those tools were found in a deposit where someone had basically already mined it. So the Bronze Age people had already mined it, accidentally buried their tools or whatever, and left it there. Then someone in the 18th century came along and dug it out again because they thought it might still have some good tin in it, right? Now, you don't get an entire Bronze Age's worth of tin from a single deposit that someone a few thousand years later thinks worth digging out again, right? So again, we need to find the holes in the ground where this tin came from. Another point is that Carnon, Bodmin Moor, St Agnes all have exactly the same geology as Dartmoor, right? The only difference is the River Tamar, right? And all of our modern conceptions about what Cornwall and Devon and England is, right? Anything that was going on in Cornwall in the Bronze Age was happening on Dartmoor and Devon as well. But Dartmoor and Devon falls under the old English academic way of thinking, and Cornwall falls under a Celtic nationalist way of thinking, right? So the Cornish are like, yeah, we were mining, yeah, we were supplying, yeah, Joseph was a tin miner, yeah, let's get it on. And in Devon and Dartmoor, they go, I don't know. And that was the real sad thing about the latest Project for Tin report, is that Alan Williams, the author, he makes a plea at the end. He says, we need to reevaluate what's going on with these cultures in this period, in this part of the world. They were connected to these really powerful, really advanced civilizations in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, you know, like the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, the Minoans. Therefore, in southwest Britain, got more than we bargained for there. Yeah.
Sorry, my cat was playing up. Carry on, Peter.
So he's made this plea. we need to reevaluate what's going on in the West Country. There would have been cultural exchange as well. And I can say that from my conversations I've had with the Dartmoor archaeologists, this is not, it's barely raised an eyebrow for them. They're not reevaluating anything. And that's really sad.
Okay. It is very sad, yeah. On that note, Peter, why will modern academia not accept Arthur as a genuine historical character? Has officialdom ever accepted Arthur as a genuine historical character?
Yes. So let's go with part two of the question first. Okay. Have they accepted him as historical? Yes. You go back to the even early 60s. And most academics would have accepted him as historical. They might not have accepted him as a high king of Britain in the same way that Geoffrey portrays him. They might have just said, "Oh, he's a local Arthur, or a a regional king, or maybe even not even a king at all, but just a general or something like that." But they would have accepted that essentially Arthur was real historical, and that was say late 50s, early 60s, and then by the 70s things had swung towards a non-historical Arthur. So yes, that's the answer to that part of the question. Why won't they accept him now? So one thing we always encounter is the issue with the lateness of the sources. But your guess, sorry, I can't remember the gentleman's name. I keep on saying monkish scribes. What was the gentleman's name again?
Oh, Dr. John Hart.
So one thing John Hart said as well is when you go back and look at how they study ancient Egyptian history or ancient Greek history, man, they are working from dodgy late sources, and they are just doing their best to piece it together, and they will make some quite bold claims based on that pretty weak evidence. And there's not really a lot of difference between what we've got in Britain for that Arthurian period and what they've got for looking. And now they may be looking further back in time, but they're still working with late sources that contradict each other. You work with what you've got. And I think it's very risky to just completely ignore or, I don't know, exclude entire texts because you don't feel comfortable with it in some way, either politically or because there's some sort of myth encoded in it as well. You then completely disregard the whole lot as history. But it's I think it's tricky. You shouldn't go around excluding stuff. That's really dangerous, and that's what seems to be done quite a lot. Is that they go, no, I don't like this, so I'm going to exclude it. I don't like this, so I'm going to exclude it. And then they don't need to explain anything about Arthur. They don't need to explain why we have all these stories because they've just excluded them. Is there any history of Arthur? No, there isn't, because I've decided there isn't.
Pretty much. Okay, brilliant. So just to round up or to finish off, do you think that will ever change?
Yes.
Good.
Although, on a rather bleak note, I think it's just a pendulum. So yes, I think it will change, and I think it also has the chance to swing back.
It's all politics, in other words.
I think, or fashion, or not necessarily politics, but certainly ideology.
But surely history should be above all those things.
Oh, yes. So should science as well.
He said naively. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've got the same opinion on that, Paul. Yeah. I do think that we will see maybe a slight swing towards a historical Arthur and then a reaction back, and then I think that's more than possible. And over what time period? Over 50 years, over 100 years, over 500 years? How things could change. I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. That's been fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've really enjoyed this. It's a pleasure, mate. It's been brilliant, especially for my first full Arthur video. That's been absolutely outstanding. I really appreciate your time. Cheers, mate. Okay. I would love to get you back to talk about sorry, excuse my putting me off. I'd love to get you back to talk about a subject that I'm hoping my audience hasn't got bored with yet, because I just can't get
Oh, yeah.
bored with it. And that's the early Christian. There they go again. That's the early Christian church in
Okay,
Britain.
well, like apostolic church. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'd love talking
Yeah,
about
I'd
that.
love
Yeah,
to do that with you
yeah,
at
I
some
think it's
point.
fascinating.
Brilliant. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. We've had loads of comments this evening, which I really, really appreciate. There's been a few questions I've noticed that you've been very naughty with, and you haven't put in capitals. So I've only just noticed one or two, and it's a bit too late now. So please, in future, put your questions in capitals. Next week, I'm joined by a guy called Matt Apocalypse, who has done some really fascinating research on the geodetic grid of the Earth, and some of our ancient megalithic sites in Britain as well. So that should be great. Look out for that. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be back with you next Sunday.